Here's what some people are saying about the Projection Booth podcast.
The Projection Booth is single-handedly the greatest film podcast you could ever listen to or could possibly want.
Top notch. 5 stars. This has quickly become one of my favorite film-related podcasts. Always interesting.
A completely unpretentious yet fully comprehensive look at films from all genres.
The Projection Booth podcast, with new episodes available every week at projectionboothpodcast.com.
You are listening to the In the Mouth of Dorkness podcast. Here are Brad, Lisa, Brian, and Darren.
Do it. Okay. All right, I am recording in 3, 2, 1. Welcome to another edition of the It Modcast podcast. Joining us is Brian Young, the Turtle Dork.
Happy Friday, everybody.
Also in attendance is Lisa Gullickson, wife dork.
In the words of Tom Hanks, thank God it's Fistful Friday.
And
he did say that.
Brad Gullickson.
I asked him.
Nice.
Mouth dork.
Happy Birth of the Dragon Day, folks.
Ooh.
Darren's already seen it 3 times last night.
And I am your host, Darren Smith, the Disco Dork. And welcome to the It Modcast podcast, Fistful Friday.
We have a substitute. Darren's out, and so we brought in Count Von Low Voice to do our Fistful Friday. Welcome, Count Von Low Voice.
It is my honor to be here. Thank you.
I'm really good at improv. Yes, and go fuck yourself.
Yeah. Happy Friday, everybody. TGIFF.
Hey, where did the count go?
Look,
Clunk.
This is
That's him
Disco's,
closing the door.
Yeah, this is a disco seat. Happy Friday, everyone. Your favorite day of the week. Our favorite day of the week here. Fistful Friday in honor of the end of the summer, 2017. We have our Fistful of Summer. So we do this every year, where we take a look back at the films of the summer months, and we chronicle our top 5 of those films. So
and we're counting from Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2
yes.
in the first weekend of May to Birth of a Dragon the last weekend of August.
All right. Brian, start it off. Your top 5.
Man, this is such a difficult list for me because there's movies I've missed this summer that I feel like probably would be in my top 5.
Can we hear what movies you failed at life?
As of this recording?
I think his top 5 will reflect this.
Yeah, as of this recording, because I will see these films.
So these are films that you think could be on this list?
Possibly. I'm thinking 3 films: Logan Lucky, Girls Trip, and Big Sick are films that I missed that I really wanted to check out this summer.
That's not that bad though. Like if those are the only 3 you missed.
There's some other movies that could potentially probably been in my top 5 of the summer. I think.
But you saw Transformers last night.
No.
Oh.
So with that being said, I feel like my list is slightly generic. So
there's no such thing, Brian.
I know. Okay. So my number 5 is Wonder Woman. Yeah, I really enjoyed Wonder Woman. I saw it twice in the theater. I love what Patty Jenkins was able just to do with the character of really just kind of exploring, like having Diana kind of enter into this new world and showing the horrors of war and her finding her place to really kind of step up and make a change in this world. I liked that. I liked that journey that she went on. The aesthetic of the film, really getting a look at the mascara and the land of the Amazonians, and showing how that world is hidden from the rest of the world. I don't know. I just really took to this film, and the second time around, I really bought more so into the relationship between Steve Trevor and Diana Prince, and I don't know. It was just a movie that I think the second time it kind of affected me a little bit more than the first. And I'm interested in watching the film again. But, so yeah, I would say Wonder Woman is my number 5.
I think of all the films this summer, that's the film I'm looking forward the most to rewatching.
Okay. I know you weren't really like...
Well, I would encourage listeners to go back and check out our review cast of Wonder Woman. I was, and actually I was not the only one at this table, deeply disappointed on my first watch of the film. My second watch, I actually really loved it.
Oh,
and I'm guessing I'm probably somewhere between those two experiences. But yeah, it certainly gets me excited for Justice League and the future of the DCEU.
Absolutely.
And really, I just want to see where this character goes in the second film.
All right.
Yeah.
Wife Dork,
Yes.
of the films that you were able to partake in this summer, what would be your number 5?
My number 5 is Spider-Man Homecoming.
Yeah.
I think a really worthy addition to the MCU. We got to meet Tom Holland as Peter Parker in Marvel Civil War. What? Yes. And I fell in love with him as Spider-Man in that film, and I think that and that love was only deepened with Spider-Man Homecoming. I love the fact that they've always been playing, not just expanding the MCU in terms of characters, but in terms of tone. I love that this is a high school flick and a nod to the John Hughes film. And it really gets me excited for this next chapter of the MCU and getting to see Peter Parker's relationship with Tony Stark change, see him become even more a part of the Avengers. So yes.
Great pick. Brad, your number 5.
For my number 5, I'm also very curious to see how this character will be incorporated into the MCU, and that is Casey Affleck from A Ghost Story.
Yeah.
The David Lowery film. It was a movie that, if you remember back to A Week in Dork or Two, that when it played to our audience did not respond positively to it at all. So much so that there was walkouts, verbal altercations between myself and somebody else. I wrote an article about that experience for Film School Rejects. Plug, humble brag. But despite the insanity of that response from the crowd, I was deeply engaged by this movie. And I think that certainly speaks to the power of the performances, but the visual storytelling that Lowery commits to in this film. It's the story of Casey Affleck's husband. Are they married, or are they just a couple?
No, they're married.
They're married, yeah.
They share a home.
Oh, there's a ring, isn't there? There's a wedding ring?
Yeah.
At one point. He dies in a car crash, and he comes back as a bedsheet ghost. And the film is incredibly quiet. At times, it's practically silent. The camera is often static. There's the infamous pie eating sequence in which you watch Rooney Mara consume a pie from her realtor, who drops it off in her moment of grieving, for 9 minutes you watch her consume this pie, and you watch Casey Affleck watch her consume this pie, and it's horrifying. But as you stay with the bedsheet ghost, and as he explores the eras of this house after Rooney Mara leaves, the sorrow that ties him to that place is profound and incredibly moving. And I was stunned that in the last scene, the last shot, practically the last shot of the movie, when the emotional climax happens for him, it reduced me to a puddle. It reduced Lisa and myself to a puddle.
Much to the jeers of our audience members.
Yeah, it was so weird. It's so weird to be in a crowd crying while other people are booing.
Unaffected.
Are booing, unaffected, and also mocking your wife for crying. It was
a bizarre experience.
weird.
But I do agree that I mean, the fact that the message of that film could transcend the audience and transcend the viewing situation that we were in.
I don't know what movie they thought they were going to see, but it was certainly not the one that they got. I would love to see this film with Film Club 3.0 over at Alamo Winchester or the Secret Society of Filmmasons in One Loud in Alamo. You want to see it with people who respect the form, who are willing to commit to an experience.
I think it also requires an open-mindedness. I think.
Absolutely. You certainly have to just be willing to converse with the film that you get. I think so often we try to bend movies to our own point of view, and I think that flies in the face of being a cinephile. You need to ask yourself, why is this film being told in this manner?
Mm-hmm. Open yourself up to the empathy machine.
Yeah, absolutely. And I deeply connected with A Ghost Story.
Yeah,
it would be a cool film club as well, just to have that engagement and
like
conversation.
Like an ItMod film club. Yeah. That'd be interesting. Mm-hmm. I'm certainly, like with Wonder Woman and like with Spider-Man Homecoming, I am looking forward to getting my hands on that Blu-ray and having some alone time with A Ghost Story.
Yeah.
So there you go. A Ghost Story, number 5.
All right. Good pick. My number 5 is Good Time. Robert Pattinson's film, the indie release that was recently released, directed by the Safety Brothers. And I just reviewed this on a recent Weekend Dork. I put this one on my list, and I have been fortunate enough to have had a tremendous summer as far as quantity of films I've taken in. And I guess my criteria for putting this particular one on my list is that this was out of all the films on my list, and I think out of all the films that I've seen in theaters this summer, this was the one that effectively I felt like took me on a journey. Like when I was in the theater, it took me outside of my own personal space, and I went on this really dark, intense, and at times stressful odyssey with Robert Pattinson's Connie as he attempted to round up some bail money for his brother that it locked up in jail because of Connie's idea to rob a bank. And where that story goes and where it takes that character was just I don't know, like I mentioned it in my review, and that the way that they shot that location, those locations in that neighborhood, it just gave it this almost otherworldly, underbelly, seedy feel to it that felt like it was taking me on this I don't want to say nightmarish journey, but almost, it was borderline nightmarish journey, because the way that the scenes were lit, just shooting the inside of someone's house or row house made you feel like you were in something that was at once familiar, but also far removed from my personal reality. And it was something that would permeate the rest of the film, a surrealness to it, but a very relatable and understandable situation. Not that I would make the same choices that Robert Pattinson's character would make in the film for, my brother. I firstly wouldn't even put him in that situation, but just understanding that the love for his brother was so strong that he would find himself making these choices in this situation. And again, as we talked about before, like Robert Pattinson has just been having a tremendous career, and I'm glad that he chose to make this film, because it's another strong performance from him. So much so that I've been looking forward to watching it again. It's a film that I'm looking forward to seeing on home video as well.
I think it opens wide here. I know it's playing at E Street Cinema right now.
Yeah.
But I'm hoping, Alamo might get it.
I hope Angelica carries it.
Angelica, yeah. Have you seen their previous film, Heaven Knows What?
No.
I want to watch that as well. This is a film that I'm sad that I wasn't able to see before recording today. But
yeah, same here. Though what you say about it being like otherworldly and like visually, like just from the trailer, even just the trailer is very agitating. There's like something very abrasive about
but
it,
it's
very
also
evocative.
like crazy gorgeous.
And
it's an ugly beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, agreed.
It's a very tangible visibly, and there's a sense of urgency because just by default, because Robert Pattinson's I have to hurry up and get my brother out. He won't last. So there's a sense of urgency built into the narrative, but also the way that it's shot also lends itself to that sense of urgency that I really appreciate. So much so that I've clearly been thinking about this film a lot since I've seen it, and I can't say that for 80 to 90% of the films that I saw this summer. A lot of them I totally forgot I've seen within the past 2 or 3 months. But this one, even though I only saw it maybe like 2 or 3 weeks ago, it's still one that I think about on a regular basis. So that's my number 5.
I've completely forgotten Hitman's Bodyguard, and I saw it yesterday.
Jeez, Brian.
I agree.
Brian, you're number 4, Hitman's Bodyguard.
No.
Oh
man, if that was on my list, then it'd be a hell of a list.
That's a short summer.
Yeah, tell me about it. So my number 4 is actually Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2.
Yeah.
This is a weird film for me when I initially saw it, because when I initially saw it, it was a movie that it took, I don't know how to say this, like it took a while for me to kind of come around on it, because I think when going into the film, I didn't really know how to really interpret the film, because I was, one of my biggest criticisms about the film, and we talked about this when we did our review cast, and on my second viewing, it actually made it a lot better for me, was the movie is not really very plot driven until really maybe the third act. And I remember you said something, Lisa, like you were like, well, it's really the type of film where you just spend time with these characters.
It's character driven, yeah.
So on my second watch, and then after that, I went and saw the movie for the second time, and I kind of just took that, once I kind of got that element of it, and put that to the side, I really just looked at the film, and especially from the characters that we got in the first film, going back and then seeing Volume 2, it works a lot when you are just in these moments with these characters and seeing the interactions between these characters and how effective that is towards the end of the film, when you see the arcs of all these different characters, with it not really being a very plot-driven film. I think it almost kind of, the way I described it in my review is like it kind of has that rope-a-dope style. It's like, it kind of lulls you in, and then like it just hits you with that like kind of like emotional wallop, especially with the Yondu and the whole storyline, the storyline between fathers, and the second time watching it, the sister storyline between Gamora and Nebula, and that really, really affected me because I saw elements of my relationship with my own brother in that relationship, and seeing how damaged Nebula was. Like those were the intimate moments in that film that I really, really got invested in, and and just for that alone, I think it's a remarkable film. And I don't know, like it seems like now being 3 months removed from Guardians, like a lot of people are kind of shitting on the movie a little bit more. I've been hearing that narrative a lot.
There was a big mixed reaction when the film came out. And now that mixed has turned even more sour, I think, from certain people.
Yeah, and I've actually gone the other way, where I was kind of mediocre the first time, but now like I'm interested to see it. Comes out, it's already out. I've seen it.
Yeah, you own it already. That was the past, Brian.
But yeah, it's just a movie that I think I'll revisit, and it just really works. It just really works on all levels, especially the character moments. So
All right.
So, in your relationship with your brother, are you Gamora or are you Nebula? Or is that too intimate a question?
no, I would be Gamora.
Oh, shit. Your poor brother.
I know.
So damaged.
Yeah, trying to help him.
All right, Lisa, your number 4.
My number 4 is War for the Planet of the Apes.
Yeah.
So, this, of course, being... Like, I love Brad's comment he made about this film, about, like... the Planet of the Apes trilogy as a whole is one of the most consistent trilogies in all of film. And just consistently good. And then with each film elevating the last. Excuse me if I'm taking your future points, but I'm crediting you.
No spoilers.
So, this made it onto my list in that, you know, we've been living with this Caesar for many years now, and seeing how he has grown from being, you know, dependent on humans, and then realizing his own, you know, humanity or ape-manity, and then to becoming a revolutionary, and then becoming a leader, becoming real royalty. And so I think with this film, this is the most removed from humanity we get. It's really starring the apes. And we get to see a real hero story, a real martyr story in Caesar, as well as getting to know some of his fellow apes a little bit better. Apes that we have seen in past films, we get to know them more completely, like Maurice, like Rocket. The storyline of Rocket throughout the films is just beautiful.
In some ways, Rocket's story is my favorite story.
Exactly. Yeah. From, you know, Why Cookie Rocket to, you know, now we're
grieving angry father.
Grieving fathers. That's right. Also, I forgot my next point. But also the story with Koba and the image that Koba has become as part of Caesar's motivation. Yeah, so I really, it's visually stunning. The motion capture technology, you know, I think that the uncanny valley has been breached and surpassed. These characters are real to me now.
Michael Giacchino's score.
Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. Andy Serkis's performance, of course, really perfect. So, yeah, this is my number 4.
All right, B, your number 4.
My number 4 is also Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. I enjoyed this movie from the get-go.
Okay.
I was pro after the first screening. After the second screening, I was trying to figure out which one I liked more, Volume 1 or Volume 2, and I came out Volume 1. An interesting thing happened 2 weeks ago. You know, Lisa was vacationing with her family in the Outer Banks, and I couldn't go because of work and blah, blah, blah. But I promised to come down for a couple days, and I left work at 5 p.m. from Arlington, and I drove down to the Outer Banks. And at the point when I got to Williamsburg, I was exhausted, right? Like, I'd pounded, you know, a couple 5-hour energy drinks, and it was having no effect. So I had to get up and walk around. Okay. And I saw from the freeway that there was a Walmart. So I was like, okay, I'll pull into a Walmart. I'll go look at Blu-rays for a little while, stretch my legs, right? And when I went there, they had the soundtrack to Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 on compact disc. And the car that I drive only plays compact disc. I cannot connect my future phone to my stereo. No. So I bought for like $9.99 the soundtrack to Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. And it's such a great soundtrack. Yeah. You know, I mean, I think for a lot of people, Volume 1 was a revelation. And we've talked about how the songs are an extension of his mother's love and how wonderful it is to see that love also touch the Guardians themselves. You know, how it slowly incorporates itself into the lives of, Rocket and Groot, but also Yondu, as we see in Volume 2. So I'm listening to the soundtrack driving down, and, you got Mr. Blue Sky and Chains, and it gets to playing Brandy, right? And I'm listening to Brandy, and I'm thinking about Ego and Peter's relationship to his mother, and his lady, and how Ego hears that song, how his mom hears that song, and how Peter hears that song with the context of Ego at 2 points in the movie, right? It's a motivation for understanding why his father left. And then when that turns sour, I mean, that motivation, like that song becomes sinister. And so I'm just replaying the entire movie over the course of this soundtrack, but again, in Brandy. And then it gets to Cat Stevens, father and son. And when that plays, I'm thinking about Yondu. The arc of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 is Peter finding his biological dad and realizing he had his daddy the whole time. His true father was Yondu. And the way the film handles that, because you also have Rocket over the course of Volume 2 being a total shit to everybody and pushing everyone away through his own animosity and his angst and his awkwardness and his uncomfortableness in his own skin. And you have that scene with Yondu and Rocket after they've jumped 17 times across the galaxy, and you see the awesome Stan Lee Watcher cameo. And Yondu goes to Rocket, he's like, don't you see? I know what you're doing. You're being a shit on purpose because every time you get close to something, you got to push it away. And I've been doing that my entire life. And you start to see how Yondu and Peter's relationship has been, and how Yondu regrets that relationship with Peter in his confession to Rocket in that moment. And then Ego reveals himself to be an egomaniac celestial monster looking for a purpose, and he is Peter's mother's murderer. And that this biological father is evil, is a villainous. And, the whole movie you're waiting for like the plot to reveal itself, and you've been tricked into, there is plenty of plot going on. You just didn't know it.
Yeah.
And then Yondu gets to be reunited with Peter. You get, Mary Poppins, y'all. Peter and Yondu are able to connect as father and son at the end of Yondu's life. Yondu, as a father, sacrifices himself for his son's well-being, and dies. But there's also this other storyline about Yondu being a Ravager, and he's been shamed and disgraced and pushed out of the rest of the Ravager clan with Starhawk and Sylvester Stallone. And you'll never have, I can't remember the alien names, but the flags of blah, 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 and the lights of blue, blue, blue. And Yondu dies, and Rocket, as his own thank you to Yondu for having that conversation, sends out communique to the Ravagers and tells them, look, I know you guys hate this guy, but he sacrificed himself, and you are all alive still because of him. And the Ravagers come back and celebrate the life of Yondu as his ashes are being scattered into space and the fireworks go off. And not only do you have, Cat Stevens going on and Peter seeing this, you have Rocket seeing this, You're having an emotional closure with that character and his relationship with Yondu, Peter's relationship with Yondu, and Kraglin, who's been jealous of Peter his entire existence, because from Kraglin's point of view, Yondu's showed way too much affection to this Peter guy.
Yeah.
And Kraglin wants to be the son and has never been the son. And when Kraglin, as a Ravager, sees the Ravagers accept Yondu, he has a moment of celebration and closure with his relation, the ending of that relationship.
Yeah. And he's always been loyal to Yondu.
It's like, it is a massively emotional climax.
Yeah.
It is awesome how that is all set up and paid off by the end of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Yeah. So I'm listening to Cat Stevens' father and son play, which is playing on a Zune that was given to Peter by Kraglin from Yondu.
Yeah.
And so his mother's music has been destroyed, and now he has his father's gift, his father's music. And the fact that Yondu has cloned music of Peter's, has put, has songs on this Zune, means that mother's music affected Yondu as well. And that Yondu also felt the love of the Earth songs and Peter's mother.
Yeah.
This is everything that's going through my head as I'm listening to Cat Stevens, and I'm driving down to North Carolina, and I am bawling. I'm in the car, and I'm like ugly heave crying. Listening to Cat Stevens.
By yourself.
And then it cuts right to Flashlight, and the closing credits.
Yeah.
And then the David Hasselhoff Guardians Inferno thing kicks on. So I immediately just put it back on repeat. And I listen to the CD. And for the car ride back up after I have my time with Lisa and the family, I listen to Guardians of the Galaxy on loop for that 8-hour drive.
Wow.
And, I get back, I'm like, oh man, I can't wait for that Blu-ray. I can't wait to watch this Blu-ray.
Yeah.
I just cannot wait. Well, it's now video on demand. Oh, well, I'm going to have to wait because I want to own the physical media because I'm 100 years old. I told you about my compact disc. But I can't wait. And I had to buy the digital download. I had to watch it. And I watched it again, and I had the same emotional reaction to, watching it the third time as I did when I was listening to the soundtrack. And it is easily I preferred Volume 2 to Volume 1. And this time I did watch Volume 1 and Volume 2 back to back with Lisa. And, I love Volume 1. I love the introduction of all those characters. But from the jump, Volume 2 is fully formed and knows what it's doing and knows its characters and loves its characters and is going to torture the fans emotionally.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I don't get about the criticisms, because a lot of people say that, I think they missed the point of that, because a lot of people say, well, the comedy undercuts a lot of those moments. They say specifically with Drax. But it still works. Even Drax has those moments as well.
A lot of those characters, their comedy is a defense mechanism from the hard lives they've led.
Yeah.
Their every joke that they make also reveals something about their emotional story.
Which is true about great comedy, period.
Absolutely. So I think that people maybe went in expecting more of an action movie.
Yeah.
I think they wanted a repeat of Volume 1.
And I'm so glad it's not.
And they did not. They did not do that.
Yeah.
And thank God, I say.
Yeah. It's a great movie.
All right. My number 4 is...
Let's go ahead and do it.
Just say it, man.
Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Men Tell No Tales.
What?
You're so weird.
It's no secret that I'm a fan of this franchise, minus the fourth one.
Fourth one. On Stranger Tides.
On Stranger Tide, right. That one is like the Phantom Menace to me. That doesn't exist. That's like the prequel trilogy. That one doesn't exist. I had a ball, as you would know if you listen to our review cast for the film. I had a ball with this film. I love what the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise does regarding this sense of swashbuckling adventure in our present times as far as cinematically. Like I genuinely love that going on a journey, and having these adventures with these characters that I really find enjoyable. I love the aesthetic of the Pirates franchise. I love the uniqueness of the environments and the magic stuff, and Davy Jones, and in this particular film, I love the continuation and how a lot of the seeds that were planted earlier in the franchise have this payoff, and there's a sense of finality to it. Even though if Disney wants to, they want some more money, they'll probably just crank out another one and bring Johnny Depp back. But I love that characters like in a similar vein to how Yondu is in the first Guardians, and then how in the second one, like, all of a sudden he's brought more to the emotional forefront. Like there's a similar thing going on with Jeffrey Rush's Barbossa character in the Pirates franchise, where like he's the main villain in the first film, but then like in the second and third films, he's a side character, not really contributing much from an emotional standpoint to the narrative or any of the characters moving forward. But in this in Dead Men Tell No Tales, he has a prominent part to play in the narrative, and from an emotional standpoint has one of the strongest beats in the film for me. And I put this on my list, and I responded so positively to this film because I'm a fan of the franchise. I'm a fan of Will Turner and Elizabeth Swann's characters and their relationship, and I love how the franchise returns to those characters after abandoning them for On Stranger Tides. And the conclusion that they have to these characters, for me, watching that film, I was surprised to have such an emotional reaction to just the musical cues that the lover's theme for those two characters. When that plays, when a snippet of that plays in the opening, when we meet Will's son, and when Will meets his son, and you have that snippet of music from the theme of Will and Elizabeth, I found myself surprisingly, I felt something, because it just reminded me of those characters. And then when Elizabeth brought back at the end, I found out just how much I really enjoy seeing those characters on screen. And I like that this film had just the right amount of of action, of emotion, and then comedy. Although, like, at this point, Johnny Depp is, he's way into, maybe a little bit too deep into Jack Sparrow mode, because, some of it could have been lightened up a bit. But all in all, I felt like, especially for the main characters, for Jack, going back to revisit or showing us a young Jack Sparrow and how he came to be and how that plays into Captain Salazar. But then, so, seeing some more of Jack Sparrow, learning more about a character we're 5 movies into now, still learning more about him and who he is, and then also having closure with Elizabeth and Will was extremely satisfying for me as a fan of the franchise. And so I just I really had a good time in the theater watching that movie.
While I did not enjoy it as much as the first 3,
right,
I did have a good time with it.
Yeah, and when I think about summer movie seasons, as an older adult now and in a more steadied cinephile, like, I don't just relegate blockbuster big action movie films to the summer, because now I because of the Angelicas we have around here, the Alamo Drafthouse and East Street Cinemas and the AFIs, I can see things outside of the normal blockbuster any time of the year, and even in summer months. But also, when I do traditionally think of summer blockbuster season or summer movie season, I do think of the summer blockbusters. And this one was a grand adventure, big budget popcorn flick. And in that regard, in adhering to that tradition, I think this movie definitely fit the bill and provided me my summer entertainment for those 2.5 hours. So I have to have that on my list as my number 4. Brian, your number 3.
Okay, my number 3.
I know this one.
What is it?
Like I say,
no, his Transformers is his number 2, not 3.
So this is a movie that I loved.
Yeah.
I love this movie.
Does it relate to our film club coming up?
A little bit. All right. I mean, look. Okay, whatever. And
Your smile is too big, man. Just say
I
it.
really like this movie. I'm sorry, Lisa. King Arthur, Legend of the Sword. I absolutely enjoyed this film to no end. And I've said it before. I think I said it on one of the previous episodes, and even during our review cast of this. It's like I'm not the biggest like King Arthur fan. So I mean, and Excalibur. I know a lot of people hold Excalibur as the definitive King Arthur story.
What? Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, no?
You don't think that is the definitive King Arthur story?
Of the movie Excalibur?
Yeah, the movie Excalibur. Have you seen Excalibur?
I have not.
It's the definitive King Arthur story, Lisa.
I think that probably Sword in the Stone is
No,
the
Yep.
King Arthur
F
story.
Sword in the Stone. Excalibur.
With
John
Archimedes?
Borman. Fucking no.
And
Fight.
I've never seen Excalibur, and it came on cable recently, and I think I saw maybe the second half. Helen Mirren's in there.
Yeah, Patrick Stewart.
Patrick
yeah.
Stewart, yeah. I
Don't
know.
just watch the second half.
Well, it was just
Save
on.
yourself for a homework assignment, sir.
Well, no, you still can because I didn't really see every and get all the nuances of it.
What
but
cut did you watch?
I don't know. It was on cable. I don't know.
The TNT cut.
No. This was paid cable, like Showtime or something like that.
You weren't up all night with USA?
No, no. But what I really like about this movie is that it feels like a Guy Ritchie film, and it feels like it doesn't feel like Guy Ritchie directing a King Arthur movie. This King Arthur movie feels like I don't know if that makes sense. It feels like a Guy Ritchie film. It feels like it harkens back to me to like that era of like Lock, Stock and Snatch and like the independent phase that he was going through. We get a lot of his signature tropes and his stylistic of filmmaking techniques that we see more so than we really got to see in something like Sherlock Holmes or The Man from U.N.C.L.E., even though he still has his style in there.
I think Sherlock Holmes is more Guy Ritchie than King Arthur, but I agree with you about Man from U.N.C.L.E.
I agree.
Yeah, but I don't know, man. It was just something that I just really took from the moment that this film came on. It just had me hooked, and I just loved every minute of it. I mean, I thought Charlie Hunnam was great as King Arthur. I mean, I thought he had kind of just this charm about him throughout the film, and it's something different that we've seen from kind of like this mythology. I think he was really doing a different take on this. Dan Pemberton, his score was absolutely amazing. I mean, it's like a pulsating kind of rock infused kind of score, and it really does a great job of just keeping the pace of this film up. And it was just a fun time for me in the theaters. Like, I absolutely enjoyed it. It's on Blu-ray, and I rewatched it a few times, and it's still, for me, it just holds up. I absolutely love this film.
I need to watch it with Brian's eyes. Yeah. I'm gonna.
Brian, you said it's on Blu-ray home video.
Yeah.
If it's on 4K, I'll pick it up. You're selling me on like purchasing it to see, because I remember I saw it in the theater twice, and I remember enjoying it, but I don't know that I loved it as much as you. You've really come, because you enjoyed it like the first time you saw it.
Yeah,
like ever
it's
since
like,
then, it seems like you've been thinking about it a
just
lot.
really surprised me.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's probably my biggest surprise of the summer, just how much fun I mean, it's probably the most fun I've had watching the film this summer.
Yeah.
It's the worst review cast we did all year.
Oh yeah, we really sucked it
I mean,
up.
I tried to listen to our review cast of King Arthur again, and I just feel so bad.
Well, I mean,
we were joyless. And we killed and we sucked and zapped Brian's
It's okay.
joy.
No, it's cool. I mean,
we
look.
clearly didn't, because it's on his Fistful Summer.
Oh yeah, no. I mean, look, I knew when I saw this film that I loved it, regardless of
How right we were.
I think it's King Arthur. It's King Arthur, and our response to it, where Brian was like, "I'm going to do my own Turtle Dork reviews of other movies without these other assholes."
That's what spawned it.
No, I was doing reviews before then.
Yeah, you were.
In secret.
No, he was. No, he was.
I was doing it. But
I'm teasing.
Yeah,
but that
no.
review cast was the worst, and I apologize, listeners.
No, it's quite all right. But I absolutely love this film. It's just it's a rollicking good time, motherfucker.
All right, Lisa, you're number 3.
My number 3, it was one of my most anticipated films of the summer, along with King Arthur. But this one made it onto my top 5, and that is The Big Sick.
Yeah.
I wanted to see that.
A wonderful, beautiful take on the romantic comedy. And I think what really refreshed the genre, or refreshed this work in the realm of the genre, is that it was inspired by a true love story. The story of comedy icons Kumail Nanjiani and Emily Gordon. So the story is, just a quick recap. Within the movie, and also in real life, Kumail and Emily met at a comedy show, and Kumail was a stand-up comedian. Emily was just a comedian, a connoisseur of comedy, a comedy fan, and they fell quickly in love, even though both of them did not consider them in the place of a serious relationship. And Emily finds out that Kumail, being Muslim, is being set up by his parents in an arranged marriage. So they can't really so she feels betrayed because he was keeping this a secret, and he never had any intention of turning their relationship into a long-term relationship. So while they're going through this kind of hardship, Emily becomes sick, and she has to be put in a medically induced coma, and she is in that medically induced coma for 8 days. So in the movie, Kumail ends up really realizing his love for Emily and how he really screwed up their relationship. And so he is hanging around the hospital, just wanting to be there and be present with the woman that he loves when she's in this time of trial, in this fucking coma. And so he gets to know her parents, who are played by Holly Hunter and Ray Romano.
So good.
So they make a really wonderful couple. Emily talks about how they're actually nothing like her real parents. They really are fictionalizations and creations of Holly Hunter and Ray Romano, because when you have them, you just have to write for their voices and let them do their thing. So Kumail ends up hanging out with them, and he ends up kind of being integrated into the family while Emily is in this coma. And one of the things I really appreciate about this film, and listening to interviews with Kumail and Emily, because of course they're regulars on all of my favorite podcasts, and they've really been doing the rounds. And so like one of the things they were really trying to be really cognizant of is the fact that Emily, the character of Emily, even has her own views about the relationship, and she doesn't just go along with Kumail just because he loved her while she was in the coma. Like, so when she comes out of the coma, she's been not physically present. She's not been present, so she hasn't been able to see this transformation and emotional journey that Kumail's been through. So essentially, to her, yesterday Kumail was saying we could never be together, and she wakes up and now he's saying we're meant to be together, and that was just, so to her it was just like a complete blow. And so there is, even when after Kumail goes through this emotional journey of her being in a coma, she still has her emotional journey and her realizations in their relationship to follow up. So both of the characters are very fully realized, even in this kind of truncated fictionalization of their relationship. I really love Kumail's performance. I'm a huge fan of him as a comedian, and I think that he really does a great job of portraying himself, I guess, but also accessing that emotional time in his life, because he's playing himself when he was a younger and worse comedian, and they do a great job of portraying him as a worse comedian than he is currently. He has the humility to be able to show himself a bomb on stage. I think that Zoe Kazan does a really great job of playing Emily. I think that she is just a really cute and wonderful actress, and I loved the way that their relationship felt very real. they had their silly inside jokes, and they were not always cute to each other, and they weren't always nice to each other. It was very like they had a very goofy, silly love relationship that I thought felt very real. I also got to see I love to see my comedy faces pop up. Bo Burnham plays one of Kumail's closest friends, and he's a really wonderful musical comedian, which I think is really great. And also Kurt Braunohler, who plays Kumail's roommate Chris, and he's just another stand-up comedian that I just really love. So it's nice to see those faces, and I really do think that it's a beautiful film, and I think and I love the fact that Kumail and Emily wrote this script together, and they talk about and they talk about how the script evolved as they discovered the story, and they really did their best to capture they capture both points of view, the man's point of view and the women's point of view, which doesn't happen a lot in romantic comedies. I think director Michael Showalter has a really wonderful understanding of comedy and how to shoot it. And I also think that Judd Apatow and his contribution to this film is he definitely has a vision for and a very close involvement with the projects he gets on. He's also producing Crashing on HBO, which is Pete Holmes' series about his career as a stand-up comedian. So I just really enjoyed it. It played to a lot of my loves. I love love. I love comedy. I love Kumail. So yay.
I
number
loved it
3.
too. I was really distraught to find out that the lady that was playing his girlfriend in the film was not his actual. I was like, oh man, because I knew you from what you were telling me that it was based on a true story, their actual relationship. So I thought they were both playing themselves. So when I found out that wasn't her, I was like, oh no.
Emily is really wonderful though, and even though she is very involved in the comedy world, she is more on the production side of things more than the
she's not a performer.
The performance side of things. She was actually involved with Kumail's, and I'm sorry to get tired, but what's his name? He's in the new MST3K. He was on Nerdist.
Patton Oswalt. Oh, Jonah
Ray. He and what was their TV show called? The Meltdown, comedy Meltdown, Meltdown comedy. Yeah, I got there. She was actually a producer on that, a showrunner on that maybe. So she and she's also a writer, and she has her own voice on podcasts and things like that. But she's not really a performer or an actor like Kumail is. Kumail's been on Silicon Valley and all of that stuff. So I don't think it would have been fair for her to play herself.
Yeah, he's also voicing the Blue Ninja in the Ninjago movie, the Lego Ninjago.
Oh, that's
movie
right.
That's so fun.
I still don't care about that film.
Oh.
I love seeing all of these comedians that I've been loving for years just blow up. It's so freaking awesome.
Yeah. All right, good pick. Brad,
Thank you.
your number 3.
So for 3 through 1, I found it very hard to distinguish one love from another. So I put that caveat out there. Any one of these movies could probably rise or fall on this list in the next 5 minutes to 10 minutes, let alone when we talk about our top 10 films of the year at the end of 2017. But for number 3, I'm sad to say that it's 3 because, again, I love this film so much. It's Edgar Wright's Baby Driver.
Whoa, number 3.
Number 3. It's probably the most fun I had in the theater this year. Seeing it at Dolby Prime was unbelievably fantastic. I felt like I was in the seat with Baby, or following his heels during the foot chase. But Edgar Wright, I mean, this is what movies were made to do. You can't experience this story in any other art form. And say what you will about the plot, the One Last Job storyline. yes, you've seen it in a million other films and read about it in a million other crime stories, but cinematically, there was no experience this year like Baby Driver. From the opening car chase set to, oh God, now I'm blanking, Lisa. The John Blues Explosion song. Oh God, who cares? But cut to the music of that. Then to the next scene where he's doing the Edgar Wright stroll down the street to Kevin Spacey's hangout, and how they had to choreograph the hell out of that sequence to match it to the music. How the film is edited
Bell
to
bottoms.
the music. Thank you, Lisa. Bell bottoms.
Sorry.
It's an achievement in craft that I found astonishing. But I also did connect with Baby. I did connect with his relationship with Lily Collins and his relationship with his stepfather, his foster dad. I got caught up in the story. Mm-hmm. And I found it, in the context of a heist film, I found the turns to be unpredictable. I love John Hamm. I love Jamie Foxx. I love Kevin Spacey. None of those character stories end in a place that I predicted. Yeah. Like Guardians of the Galaxy 2, I've been playing this soundtrack nonstop in my car on compact disc.
All right. Good pick. My number 3 is...
Say it.
Girls Trip.
Oh.
Wow.
Stop torturing me.
Why?
So, like, Transformers is going to be like your number 1.
I told you it's number 2. I was not kidding. So yeah, so this, and there was actually, I saw quite a few comedies this summer. The Little Hours, which that's more of a dark comedy, like really dark, in a way that you wouldn't expect. But maybe you would if you do expect it if you've seen the trailer. But this comedy was one that I recently reviewed on a Weekend Dork, and in that review I stated that I was pleasantly surprised by how much I end up enjoying the film. And I enjoyed it so much because, and I found it as funny as I did because of the chemistry and the camaraderie between the 4 female leads. Tiffany Haddish, Jada Pinkett Smith, Queen Latifah, and Regina Hall. And it's not, it doesn't break the mold as far as these type of comedies go. But what it does with that mold for me was genuinely and completely entertaining from start to finish. Even following the familiar formula of these type of comedies, I found myself, because I dug the chemistry of the main characters and their friendship, I just found myself genuinely enjoying it and having fun and laughing from beginning to end. And with a comedy, I mean, that's what you want. You want to be able to have almost all of the jokes stick, and this movie did that for me. And on top of that, because of the friendship and the how well these characters played off of each other, I was able to get some emotional content from the characters and the story as well. So that was just a cherry on the top. But I genuinely found myself, I think back on that film, and I'm always recommending it to people, whether it's my coworkers or my family. And so I really had a good time with that movie. So much so that I don't know that I saw another film this year where I laughed as much in the cinema. And if you know me, I love my comedies and I love to laugh. It doesn't matter if I'm watching a comedy or not. I like to laugh. And this movie was an hour and a half, 2 hours of feel good, laughter, gut-busting laughs for me. And so, yeah, it was a highlight of my summer. Like, it was a genuine highlight of my summer, being able to laugh for 2 hours straight in a movie theater, and care about the people that I was laughing at. So that's got to be my number 3. I highly recommend the film. Even if you've seen the trailer and it doesn't look like your cup of tea, still at least give it a shot. I definitely recommend it.
I'm still planning on seeing it as well.
Brian.
Yeah. I'm
Your number 2.
So my number 2, piggybacking off of Brad, is Baby Driver. So yeah, everything you said about the film, it's just an absolute blast. So much fun. Probably the second most fun I had after King Arthur. but no, this movie is just, and like you say, it's just so much style being made. I mean, yeah, you could say as far as the whole thing about the one last job, that's a story that we've seen before, but for me, it's more about the execution and the style of the director and what they bring to that type of story. And Edgar Wright, with his very distinctive style, brings so much to the story, not just in the visual aesthetic of it and the music and the editing, but I think also just with the character. When you look at people like John Hamm and Jamie Foxx, I like the way that he's able to really portray these characters as these very dangerous and evil people, and a lot of that is attributed to just the performances by these characters. They really inhabit these characters and inhabit this world, and that world never betrays those characters in this film as well. And then you put Ansel Elgort in the middle of all this, and his story. It's just, everything just kind of works together. And you're right, it's just so unpredictable. The characters never end up where you think they will. And I like how they kind of subvert a lot of that stuff, where you see the relationship that John Hamm has with Ansel Elgort, and where that ends up towards the end of the film. Jamie Foxx's character and Kevin Spacey, I think those 3 characters don't really end up where you think their characters are headed to. So it's just a technical achievement by Edgar Wright that I thought was just magnificently done, and it's just a great film, just absolutely great film.
All right, Lisa, your number 2.
My number 2 is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2.
Yeah.
For all of the reasons already mentioned. Brad did mention that we did just recently do a back-to-backer, a double feature of Volume 1 and Volume 2. And it solidified in my heart that I really do enjoy Volume 2 more than Volume 1. And before Volume 2, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1 was my favorite MCU film. I love the marriage of music and story and action and relationships. And I think the fact that it's both written and directed by James Gunn, I think that you're getting a really pure, from his heart message. And that message is that every single character in Guardians of the Galaxy deserves an arc. Everybody, every single person, whether they're on the screen for the whole movie, like Star-Lord, like Peter Quill, or even just for a second, Sylvester Stallone's character has a complete arc in his point of view of Yondu and seeing Yondu as a real Ravager.
Hey, Taserface. He's got an arc.
Taserface has an arc. Everybody gets, every character is respected to the degree that they get a complete story, and everybody ends up in a different place. And it was interesting because after we did our double feature, Brad and I were talking about, where does Volume 3 go? Whose story still needs to get told, And I think that there's still a lot of potential there with Rocket's story. There's a lot of mystery about his past. I think that a lot of times Groot is used as a foil for our emotions, as this kind of angelic element, this innocent element. And I think that there's still...
He's a monster in the second film. He is a sociopathic child.
Exactly. Well, I mean, who isn't a monster when they're that young?
Fact.
But I think that there's still more story there. But the fact that you just leave that film so satisfied with each person and confidence in who this person is going to become, it's pretty awesome. Even Nebula, who in the first film is so flat and to the point where I'm just like, and no thank you with Nebula, like that relationship of the sisters and how that sibling relationship is something that resonates with so many people. That competitive nature of sisterhood or siblinghood, and that's everybody is just trying to survive the best they can, and sometimes you do find that you step on the people who are close to you, your sister, your brother. Amazing performances from Kurt Russell, of course. He's one of my bays from my Fistful.
He's one of all our bays, Lisa.
So yeah, I would love to wax poetic about this film, but Brad's already said so much, and Brian has already said so much. But I just want to say that I love that I love the Guardians of the Galaxy, and I like getting to see them, and I love that they've been so far removed from the rest of the MCU up until this point. Yeah. Like, it's because they are, out in space and they haven't had a lot of interaction or really awareness of the other Avengers, and it makes me almost scared. It makes me almost scared to see them integrated into the team. Yeah. A little apprehensive because I love them so much.
It's going to be so great, though.
But it is going to be so great. It's going to be so great.
What's interesting is, we touched upon this a little bit in our last week in Dork when Brian was talking about the Defenders and the challenges of adaptation and adhering to the characters of the comic books versus what the characters need to be in the films. And Marvel, with the MCU, has in every character has made wholly unique adaptations of Captain America, Iron Man. They're not all the comic book. They take from this, they take from that, and they adapt it. Guardians of the Galaxy is pretty much a blank slate for James Gunn to tell a James Gunn story. There are certainly sources that he is playing with, but he's reworked these characters for his own purposes and succeeded so well that the comic books from this point forward are going to be adaptations of these versions, of the cinematic versions of Guardians of the Galaxy. Mm-hmm. And I am totally cool with that.
Yeah. I mean, we've had the conversation again and again of if you don't like this version of this character is now an icon. We've had that conversation with Superman. We've had that conversation with Batman. We've had the conversation with Spider-Man. And I think that even characters as obscure as the Guardians of the Galaxy can be this wonderful, beautiful, evolving thing. And, as long as the story's good, I'll forgive anything.
That's a fact. Coulson has, gone from the Avengers to the comic books. And I'm really looking forward to Sean Gunn's Kraglin. Now that he has fully joined the Guardians of the Galaxy by the end of Volume 2, I'm really excited about him in Volume 3. And I want to see Kraglin in the comic books.
Yay, Kurt!
All right. Your number 2, Brad.
My number 2 is the only film that left me with the inability to speak at the climax of the film, and that is Christopher Nolan's Dunkirk. As we talked about on that week in Dork, I'm as surprised as anybody else that I love this film as much as I did. Like Baby Driver, it is a truly cinematic experience. It is a moment in time in the history of war It is the Dunkirk evacuation, told over 3 different time periods. And it is completely immersive and gripping. The most tense I've felt in a theater. But ultimately, when that movie was over, I felt like I had lived the horror of the situation with these actors, with these characters, in a way that I have not experienced in a war film before. I don't have that personal history like Darren does. The closest I've gotten to combat is all through, Call of Duty and cinema. But benchmarks before this film being, Saving Private Ryan, Platoon or something like that. Yeah. They're all very movie. And while Dunkirk is certainly a movie in the very best way, it felt experiential in an original manner. And I think a lot of that had to do with seeing it in IMAX, in full IMAX at the Udvar Hazy. But I also imagine even when I get this on Blu-ray and I put it on the TV, I'm going to still be rocked by the craft of this film and the performances. I mean, there is a script. I mean, it's there is a narrative. You are on a journey with these people, and I was, emotionally rocked by, Georgie's story and Tom Hardy's story. Cillian Murphy, they got to me.
Killian.
I say it. I'm American. I speak American.
I'm with you. I was corrected. I thought it was Killian. I like saying Cillian.
You love correcting me in my pronunciations.
But I thought it was Cillian.
I'm Joe Maine.
I like Cillian.
Yeah, Cillian sounds slick and sexy. Killian is like percussive and
yeah. Anyway, I love Dunkirk. And, I like Christopher Nolan movies. Memento, great movie. Inception, great. Prestige, great. Batman Begins, The Dark Knight Rises. I love those films.
Interstellar?
No.
No, I thought you said you like Christopher. I thought you said you like
I do. I don't like Interstellar. I don't like Following. I don't like...
Oh, really? You didn't like Following?
No. I don't like Insomnia. In fact, I hate Insomnia.
Really?
Oh, Lord.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I like the original film too much. It's one of those experiences. Okay. And it's just such a Pacino, Robin Williams movie that just doesn't work for me. But yeah, Dunkirk's, nothing's going to touch my love of Batman Begins because it's so integrated with my own love of Batman. But Dunkirk is probably my second favorite Christopher Nolan film.
Wow. Yeah.
All right. Finally, my number 2. Look here, man. I understand everyone's criticisms with the franchise. I share those same criticisms. We've talked about our feelings, my feelings in particular, about Michael Bay's take on this franchise. We've also talked about like how much a part of Transformers was of my childhood. And if you listen to my review of Transformers the last night, you would know that I had a particular screening experience with this film. We also know that I'm the tech dork and I love 3D and this and that, and I'm huge on, format and 4K and things like that. So with that being said, I can't help it. Like, my number 2 is fucking Logan Lucky.
I'm so relieved.
He's just waiting to reveal The Last Night as his number 1. We're not out of the woods yet, people.
Exactly. Pay attention. So I was surprised. I saw the trailer for Logan Lucky once, and I quickly forgot about it. I remember seeing the trailer, and I wasn't put off by it, but also wasn't like, oh man, I gotta see that film. I remember questioning, am I gonna go see that? Even seeing that it was a Steven Soderbergh directed film, I just felt like it just didn't appeal to me. That whole NASCAR backdrop, that's not a culture that I'm into, and so, I wasn't in the mood for a madcap redneck caper heist film. I just wasn't in the mood for that. So I was like, all right, well, I go watch movies. So if there's a day where I need to kill some time, or if I feel like I need to fill out my weekend dork, I'm gonna go out. Maybe I'll check it out. It was a film that I caught after our recording of our Fistful of Heists in honor of Logan Lucky. So I end up going to check the movie out, and I mean, probably one of the biggest surprises, pleasant surprises for me, in that I had the lowest of expectations, but I came away with on the highest of highs. Like, it was such a surprisingly feel good movie for me. It's a heist film, but it's one of the ones where, when we talked about in our most recent, our Fistful of Heists, Brad, we talked about, one of the staples of, if you're going to have a good heist film, it has to be, you have to, you got to have your good crew, but then you also have to have a good plan for the heist. It has to be a nice, smart and clever plan in how you're going to pull this off to, eventually have your unforeseen hiccup and how they're going to, outmaneuver that. Well, with the backdrop of NASCAR and Steve Soderbergh excels at the heist thing. I don't know if it's because of his experience with the Ocean's film, but he should just do different variations on this. Is just be his subgenre, because how he weaves together the plan and how they pull these things off, I really found enjoyable about the film. And the one thing, the biggest surprise for me, not even surprise, but what I think I like the most about it is, it's not a film about the heist going wrong and how do you, now they have to get away, or you're in suspense of, are they going to get caught, and then at the end it just doesn't work out, blah, blah, blah. I mean, it really is a film where they're meant to get away. Like, this guy has been put through the ringer. He just had the roughest of circumstances, and now he's due for a good turn of luck. And I just like that the movie just felt good in that regard. And I talked about some of my picks on my list for my Fistful of Heists. We look at Set It Off, where that just goes tragic, and you feel and you sympathize with those characters, but then they meet a tragic ending, and then you have that emotional gut punch. We talked about Heat, and how that being the pinnacle of the heist film, but the examination of the cops and the robbers, and it's a dour look at the life of someone who's on the trail of a criminal, and then that criminal that has a life of being on the run from the guy on his tail. So, there's nothing feel good about that. Like, the Pacino is on the downward spiral of another marriage, and at the end of that film, that marriage is most likely over with, and we know how it ends for De Niro. Like, he doesn't get away, so there's no happy ending there. So a lot of these heist films don't necessarily end. And I mean, you do have some upbeat ones like the Ocean's films, but I mean, this one, I immediately, from the opening of that film, it was the exchange between Channing Tatum and the young lady who plays his daughter. Right from that exchange, I said, I'm going to love this movie. But as a father to a little girl, his conversation with her and her conversation with him, how they interacted and how they talked, I immediately saw myself with my daughter, and him wanting to be there for her pageants and all her activities and things like that. Like, I saw myself in that. I saw my daughter in that. I go to my events. I walk in the auditorium, and I've walked in there a few times where I didn't tell her I was coming, and I've seen her face when she sees me, or I tell her I'm coming, but she doesn't see me walk in. She doesn't know I'm there until she's out on stage, and then I can see her scanning the crowd, and I see the worry on her face, and then when we make eye contact, I see her face light up. So like I really connected with the characters, and we also mentioned in our Fistful that the key thing, one of the key things is you have to connect to that the group of who are pulling off this heist, and Adam Driver is he's really good in this film. Daniel Craig was surprisingly great in the film. I thought he was going to be like an antagonistic character, but he really turns out to be a really good, addition to this crew. Riley Keough, who played one of the 5 wives in Mad Max Fury Road, she's really good as Channing Tatum's sister. Just the whole cast was great. And, how that turned out, how the heist turned out, like the film was one step ahead of me in that I couldn't predict what was going to happen, and I couldn't predict how that heist was going to play out. But I found it really ingenious, and whether or not that was plausible or actually doable didn't matter to me. Because again, from the get-go, I was invested in the characters. I was willing to go along with whatever they gave me, and what they gave me was truly and genuinely entertaining for that entire runtime. Man, they even have a Game of Thrones reference in there. One of the there's a prison. There's a prison riot. And
don't spoil it for Brian.
All right.
It's too good.
Yeah, it put the biggest smile on my face, and it just made me laugh. And it was perfect. Like that. I have no. It's my number 2 because I have no complaints about the film. Like, I love the pacing of it. I love the characters. I love the dialogue. I dug Channing Tatum's character in the film. I really found myself feeling like, this is a righteous guy. He deserves this break. I hope this heist turns out well. I don't know how it's going to turn out, but I hope it turns out well because I want this guy to do good. He needs his turn of good luck. And so all the supporting characters again were just spot on. So Sebastian Stan with his cameo, I don't know that I knew he was in the movie, but he was great. Seth MacFarlane was a true dick, like he's supposed to be. But I enjoyed this. I had no complaints with this film. I was thoroughly entertained and totally surprised by how much I enjoyed Logan Lucky.
Did you know that Riley Keough is the grandchild of Elvis Presley?
Mm-hmm.
I did not know that until this week.
Yeah. Yep. So that's my number 2. Brian, your number 1.
So my number 1 is War for the Planet of the Apes.
Yay!
Absolutely love this movie. Matt Reeves. I'm just such a huge fan of Matt Reeves. I love his style. Like, we talked a lot about this summer was filled with filmmakers that really have very definitive and distinctive styles. And looking at films like Baby Driver and looking at movies like King Arthur, we talk about Guy Ritchie and Edgar Wright. But Matt Reeves, even though he may not have such a distinctive style, what I love about his films is how he creates this sense of atmosphere in his films. And the Planet of the Apes, especially the 2 films that he has directed, the way these films start off, there's such quiet films, and how he's able to really just get you from the point of view of the apes. Again, I just love the whole idea of how we always side with the apes in these films, because these films are told from Caesar's point of view, because we're following his arc and his story. And I just think Matt Reeves just does such a superb job of really conveying that and showing that on screen. And just like you were saying, Lisa, the consistency of this trilogy throughout and the characters that were established in that first film back in 2011, and seeing their arc, whether it's with Caesar or with Cornelius or with Rocket or with Maurice, to see that fully realized and how all that stuff is culminated at the end of this film is truly beautiful in the way that this movie just really kind of wraps up that whole story, and the way that Caesar is haunted by Koba and the events that happened in Dawn is just expertly done. And then a lot of the other characters, we look at, oh goodness, what was his name? What was the albino ape?
Winter.
Look at Winter, and then the other gorilla that was working with the humans,
Red
Donkey,
and seeing their story and then their arcs within that story, I thought was beautiful but yet tragic as well. And then again, just the whole metaphor of looking at the apes when they're captured, that sense of like really reflecting back on stuff like, slavery and internment camps and stuff like that, and how that plays, and just the metaphors that, and just how all that stuff just kind of plays out. I think Matt Reeves is just working on a different level of filmmaking when he's able to give you that really kind of spectacle, but yet really have social commentary on what he's trying to say, but not sacrificing the character as well, which ultimately it comes back to the character of Caesar. And Caesar just has a great story here, and it's just an absolutely fantastic film. I love this movie, and you're right, it's just one of the best trilogies, probably one of the best trilogies in recent memory, maybe of all time.
All right, Lisa.
Yes.
Your number one of summer 2017
is Baby Driver. Of course it's Baby Driver. There has never been this movie is like tailor-made for Lisa. It's about music, it's about crime, it's about kissing, and I just love it so much. Speaking about directors with individual voices, Edgar Wright, when you think about his Cornetto trilogy, there's always this referential nostalgia to his films. Hot Fuzz being a reference to 80s buddy cop movies, and Shaun of the Dead and horror movies. And I think that with Baby Driver, it still has that classic referential feel, but it is like a vibrant contemporary nostalgia. It's so, the way it's mixed together is so ambitious. The way that these chase scenes with the cars and on foot are so perfectly choreographed to the music. I think a lot of directors would look at that and go like, that's too hard. It's something so hard, and maybe an audience, it's the kind of hard that's the audience may not even notice or appreciate. Yeah. But he goes there, and because that's what his heart wants. He makes what his heart wants. And I think a lot of what you guys have already talked about, the fact that the characters are so impeccably realized. Even John Barenthal's Griff, for the short time he is on the screen, he creates an impression, and he has a distinct statement with his character that bolsters the theme of the film and has you reflecting on the rest of the characters in this context.
Barenthal might be my actor of the summer.
Really?
Yeah. And they're all, well, with the exception of Pilgrimage, they're all tiny, tiny roles that steals the show.
Yeah. I think that Kevin Spacey as Doc, like a very complicated villain. I love, on my second viewing, or was it my third viewing, where I started getting that paternal theme with Baby and these males around him, because he is so odd and so brilliant, but somehow vulnerable. The men around him want to mentor him and parent him. John Hamm's character, Buddy, having this relationship with him where he wants to give him fatherly advice. Doc wants to mentor him and create him to be a close, intimate part of his crew, and then maybe ultimately take his place. And then, of course, his actual father, his foster father, I'm looking for his name.
C.J. Jones, the actor.
C.J. Jones, really being his actual father, but giving Baby the space to be the person that he is. Mm-hmm. It's just absolutely wonderful and beautiful. C.J. Jones' performance as a deaf actor, and creating visibility for deaf people and deaf culture, I think is just absolutely so awesome, and really informs who Baby is as a person. And yeah, I just think everything about this movie is kind of beautiful and perfect to me. I've experienced minor backlash on social media, which I shouldn't let bother me, but like,
wait, for loving the movie?
For not backlash, personal backlash, but people who hate Baby Driver are so fucking proud that they did not enjoy it, and they cannot stop bragging about it. I'm thinking of somebody in particular. But
Anthony Bourdain.
Yeah, go fuck yourself. But I don't know.
It's such a Lisa movie.
It's such a Lisa movie. I think that it'll definitely be in my end of the year. I mean, I can't think of like maybe if 9 more movies come out that are more amazing and more catered to me than Baby Driver. I seriously doubt it. So, yeah, I just really like it, and so that's why it's my number 1.
All right, Brad, your number 1 film of summer 2017
is War for the Planet of the Apes.
All right.
For all the reasons that Lisa and Brian have already mentioned, I do think it is the single greatest movie trilogy, period. For me, I love the Planet of the Apes franchise going back to 1968 and the Heston original. I love how they all tackle in their own ways social ills, whether it's religious persecution, the racial divide, fear of the atomic bomb. But the thing about the new trilogy, Rise, Dawn, and War, is that it is about the legacy of hate. And how we are infected by it personally, the battle that we have to face every day with systematic racism and fear of the other. But as Brian was saying, where the other Planet of the Apes movies, and I don't want to like dismiss the character work and the performances and the writing of the original saga. And Planet of the Apes, again, is one of my all-time favorite movies. It's in my top 20. I'm not saying War for the Planet of the Apes is better than that one. I'm not ready to say that yet. But what Rupert Wyatt and Matt Reeves and Andy Serkis had was the time to explore the story of Caesar over the course of 3 films, and they really expose the internal of Caesar in a way that none of the previous Planet of the Apes films do, and in a way that most certainly most summer movies are allowed to do. You know Caesar by the end of War for the Planet of the Apes. Yes, he's a martyr character. He's Moses, he's Jesus, he's all those guys. But you look at his time on the cross in War for the Planet of the Apes and how Kubo haunts him, how he dealt with Kubo haunts him.
Koba.
I say, oh yeah, Koba. Kuba. Yeah,
that's the sequel.
Yeah, Kuba. We're all still trying to deal with Kuba. Koba. How that haunts him. How his actions haunt him. How the movie doesn't really, it gives him an out at the end of War for the Planet of the Apes when he finally confronts Woody Harrelson. He doesn't get he doesn't escape his own hatred. If events went a different way, if a doll was not picked up by Woody Harrelson, I do believe that Caesar would have shot him in the head and would have murdered him out of vengeance. And I would not judge Caesar harshly for that, really, either. But it is interesting to me how, a Deus Machina, actually a couple of them, let him off the hook narratively, but maybe not emotionally. I don't know. I think it's that War for the Planet of the Apes, all of the films, but particularly War, is incredibly complicated from a character standpoint. And I don't know. I did a lot of crying at the box office this summer. I think every one of the movies on my list I cried during at some point. Even Baby Driver? Yeah, even Baby Driver.
Yeah, I can see that.
Hit me in the feels. Yeah. But War for the Planet of the Apes, I cried multiple times. Dunkirk, I cried a couple times. Ghost Story, I cried after I finished screaming at everybody. And Guardians of the Galaxy, yes, sir. So it's just Niagara Falls, Frankie. Niagara Falls.
Yeah. All right. My number one, obviously, Spider-Man: Homecoming.
Yay!
So Itmod was excited about Spider-Man's inclusion in the MCU way back when there were rumblings that there was going to be this deal that would allow Marvel to include the character into the films, to the cinematic universe. And then we fast forward to Captain America: Civil War, and we get our first introduction to Tom Holland as Peter Parker, and then ultimately as Peter Parker as Spider-Man. And at that point, as I've mentioned multiple times, that segment in Brooklyn with Peter Parker, that's my favorite Spider-Man film until Spider-Man: Homecoming. This film, I said earlier that my traditional idea of summer blockbuster is the big budget and the action, the big set pieces, and you have that in spades in films like King Arthur. You have that even more so in Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Men Tell No Tales, and even in Guardians, another MCU film. But with Spider-Man: Homecoming, in hindsight, they're compared to those other films, the story is on a much smaller and personal scale. I mean, we are following Peter post Civil War and how this teenager not only is dealing with this whole power and responsibility, but just the idea of just having that power, not only the responsibility of it, but just the I'm a superhero now. Like I just hung out with freaking Captain America and Black Panther and like just what that's like, and now I have to go back to normal life. I got to go back to high school, and so how to deal with that duality, but also having another compelling character, villain in Michael Keaton's Vulture, like one of my favorite villains in the MCU thus far, and just balancing the correct tone, finding a believable Peter Parker. And having a Spider-Man that, while he has super strength, and while we just saw him on this grand, adventure in this epic battle in Civil War, but bringing him back home to the street level, to Brooklyn, and putting him back in high school, but still, and also keeping the action on a level that matches the drama and the emotional. Like it wasn't too grandiose. Yes, you had that sequence with the airplane, but there wasn't a city in peril. There wasn't a pillar of light going up into the sky. The world wasn't at stake as we know it, although Peter's world as a teenager in high school was at stake. And so I really respected that different approach to a big superhero film. And so the promise that was presented to me with Peter Parker and Spider-Man and Civil War was fulfilled in spades with Spider-Man: Homecoming, I think. And so at this point, at the closing of this film, I can't help but be extremely excited to see him stand next to Groot and exchange conversation with Tony and Rocket and the Guardians and everyone else who's coming down the pipe, and see this kid have to go from Civil War to being back in high school to standing in front of Thanos, and what that does to Peter Parker, and where that forwards him as a not only a character but as a person, having to grow up and deal with this reality is at stake. So I'm just super excited. And so I've seen that film multiple times this summer, more than any other one that I've gone back to rewatch, I think. And it's just an all around fun movie. I love the cast. I love the directing. John Watts, coming off of Cop Car, did an amazing job transitioning into big budget filmmaking under the Marvel Studios umbrella. So yeah, just a highlight of the summer for me. And oddly enough, Sia hasn't seen it yet, but I'm going to take her to see it this week before it is no longer in theaters. So yeah, that's my number one in my fistful of summer. Honorable mention, Transformers: The Last Night. So yeah, hit us up on social media. Let us know what your top 5 films are of the summer. You can do that at ItModcast on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Brian William Young is at the Turtle Dork on Instagram. At the Turtle Dork 1 on Instagram, at the Turtle Dork on Twitter, and Brian William Young on Facebook. Wife Dork is at Sidewalk Siren on Twitter and Instagram and Letterboxd.
And look on my Letterboxd. I'm going to put my whole top 10 for the summer. Just in case you're curious, that Dunkirk is my number 6. And Ghost Story is my number 7. So Atomic Blonde is 8.
9.
Then Okja, then Landline.
Yeah. Brad Gullickson is at Mouth Dork on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Letterboxd, and Untapped. I am Darren Smith, the Disco Dork, on all social medias. That's going to do it for us. Go back and listen to our homework cast of White Man Can't Jump.
Yay!
Our Weekend Dork, if you haven't checked that out also. And enjoy the rest of your weekend. Go see a movie. What comes out?
Birth of a Dragon.
That's going to do it for us. I'm going to edit that part out. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. And until next time.